Hello everyone, Michael the Librarian of Magic here, finding and cataloging the magical and pointing you to it. Today we're talking Star Wars, and specifically, what I want to talk about today is this book here, Light of the Jedi by Charles Soule. This has been out since the beginning of January, and here it is now, almost the end of February, so I've had ample time to read it. Hopefully you've had ample time to read it, if that's something you're interested in. There will be some spoilers in this discussion/review about the novel. I'm not going to go into heavy spoiler territory at the end of the novel. I won't spoil everything. But in order to talk about it, I'm going to delve into some details. I'm not going to be nearly as cagey as they were about some of the details in the promotional materials and stuff back at the beginning of January. So if you don't want to be spoiled about this at all, this is probably not the video for you. But if you're cool with a little bit of plot spoilers without having the entire novel spoiled, then thanks for joining me, and thanks for coming along for the ride. If this is something that you are enjoying or liking, go ahead and hit that like button down below, and let me know, in the comments what your thoughts are. So I'm going to jump straight in. This is the first, adult novel in the High Republic lineup. That's the new publishing initiative that they got going on with Star Wars and Del Rey, which you probably know about by now if you're watching this video. And I will just say right off the top, I really enjoyed this novel quite a bit. I like Charles Soule a lot. I've liked his runs in the comics, particularly on the Darth Vader comics. And if that's something that you've liked as well, you'll probably like this novel too. Charles Soule's take on Star Wars is just really great. It always feels really interesting and inventive to me. Charles Soule is good at taking something that you know and are familiar with, but then giving you something a little bit extra that you didn't know that you were interested in or that you wanted. And that I find to be really compelling about his work. And the Light of the Jedi is no different. So again, if you've been following some of the promotional materials but you haven't read the novel yet or anything, if you've seen some of the interviews or just buzz around the internet, you may know that one of the big the big crux of this novel is this precipitating event called the Great Disaster, which happens. I should back up, rewind a little bit to give some more details. The High Republic takes place in a time 200 years before Star Wars: The Phantom Menace. So it's a full 200 years before the fall of the Republic and all the events of the prequel trilogy. So at this point, the Jedi have still been guardians of peace and justice in the galaxy for 1,000-year period before the Phantom Menace, and here is the last 200 years of that reign or overseeing period. So there's been peace and stability in the galaxy for 800 years prior to the start of Light of the Jedi, and then there's this big catastrophic event, which I will be talking about in a little bit of detail. So that's kind of the time frame that we're working with here. What's kind of cool about that is if you're somebody who has been hoping for some Star Wars where you're seeing a lot of stuff you've never seen before, characters that you've never met before, that sort of thing, this is for you, because basically you will be familiar with none of these characters, with the exception of Yoda, who is still around and alive at this point. He is on the Jedi Council, but he doesn't feature prominently in this particular novel. He is a member of the Jedi Council in this era, but he's on sabbatical, going off to teach younglings, the ways of the Force, which is kind of his passion anyway, which you see in the prequel trilogy. So he is given his seat temporarily on the council to another person while he's on sabbatical. So Yoda is kind of on the periphery, but he doesn't really feature in this novel. The rest of the characters are pretty much all new to the Star Wars universe, and it's very interesting. If you're somebody who's very interested in the Jedi, this gives you a lot of action with the Jedi and a lot of new sort of Force powers and things that you have never seen before. If you like seeing, the Jedi do their thing, especially at the height of the Jedi Order and stuff like that, then this is a novel that you're probably going to be pretty interested in. it's one of those. Yeah, I mentioned that because fans of Star Wars often have different aspects of the Star Wars universe that they like better than others. Some people are really interested in stories about Jedi, big Jedi fans. Some people like stories about bounty hunters or scoundrels. Some people really enjoy, the sort of underground criminal aspect of things. I'm personally somebody who enjoys the politics of Star Wars, and I know that's something that a lot of people sometimes complain about with Star Wars, or was one of the complaints way back in the day when the prequel trilogy first came out. I know this is something people have probably softened on, but some people were complaining that it was too political, that they were kind of bored with the economics of the Trade Federation and all that stuff. That was right up my alley. That's one of the aspects of the Star Wars universe that's really interesting to me. And this has some interesting politics in it because you're dealing with this era of the High Republic, where you have a unified republic underneath a chancellor. Chancellor Lina So is the name of her. And she's sort of running things from Coruscant. And it's a little bit more unified. There's not as much, in the prequel trilogy, there's sort of a Republic Council where all of these planets come together in this planetary council. And I'm not sure if there is or isn't in this era. It doesn't get mentioned that much, but it seems like they just sort of have a chancellor who's calling the shots. But there's this sort of unified republic that's trying to expand itself into the Outer Rim territories to give support to all of these planets that are out on the frontiers away from the core planets where Coruscant is. So that's kind of the gist of the politics in a very brief, broad stroke. So getting to the precipitating event, which makes up pretty much the first third of this novel, The Great Disaster. Basically, there is a ship that is transporting a bunch of people, average citizens, out to an encampment or a colony in the Outer Rim so they can go live and work in this sort of agricultural area. That ends up, while they're in the hyperspace lane on their way to this colony, they are running towards a derelict ship that is stopped in the middle of hyperspace, which is not supposed to be something that is possible or that can occur, but there it is. And as this ship, the Legacy Run, tries to avoid this other ship that's stuck in the middle of the hyperspace lane, it rips itself apart trying to avoid it and breaks up into a bunch of pieces. Then these pieces, because it breaks apart in hyperspace, start flying out, ejecting out of hyperspace in random locations throughout the galaxy and hurtling towards planets and suns and solar systems and all kinds of stuff, which is this massive catastrophe. It ends up heading towards the system called the Hetzel system, where it's this agricultural area where large, chunks, fuel cells and everything from this ship that had ripped apart are headed towards the sun of this system. And if there's an impact there, then it will cause everything to go nova and basically destroy the planets in this system, the moons, and all of this food and billions of lives lost and so forth. It would be this gigantic catastrophe. And so the Jedi are tasked with trying to avert this catastrophe for a huge chunk of this novel. That is one example of what I mean by Charles Soule giving you something that you never really thought about, that or thought that you wanted, but you realize when you read it that that's a really awesome concept. The concept of there being a derelict ship just stopped in the middle of hyperspace, creating a problem as you're traveling through at light speed, is a very, very interesting concept and a really cool way to start out this book and to start out this era of Star Wars and everything like that. It really hooks you in immediately with the scenario, which is good because there's a lot of new characters in this book and a lot of moving parts. And for me personally, it took me a while to warm up to some of the characters and become invested in them by the end of the novel. I thought that Charles Soule did a great job of making me care about a lot of the characters, but there's so many of them, and you're sort of trying to keep all of these moving parts straight in your head. And if you're a Star Wars fan, you've got your galaxy brain on, and you're thinking about how this relates to all this other stuff. So the characterization stuff kind of comes a little bit later for me because of that. So if you're like anything like me, you want to stick with it a little bit. But what's great is the scenario is so compelling that you have no problem. It jumps right into the action. It's a very fast-paced, not super long, highly readable novel. And before you know it, you will be interested in the characters and the different moving parts. So basically, in the first third of this book, the Jedi are able to help stop this disaster from occurring. This planet, galaxy-wide disaster, basically, to a certain extent, I should say. They save the Hetzel system. They're able to save the sun from going nova, and it's a big effort amongst many Jedi. There's a Jedi named Avar Kriss, and she has this ability to reach out in the Force and link the powers of multiple Jedi across the galaxy, so that they can sort of all focus on one thing in order to sort of, give it Force leverage or whatever. So they are able to sort of slow down this big chunk of fuel cell and ship and everything that's headed towards the sun. It's a little bit more complicated than that. There's another Jedi that has the ability to connect to emotions very easily, and he senses that there are still living people on this derelict chunk of fuel cell and ship from the Legacy run, so they can't just push it out of the way or explode it. They can't shoot it because there are people that whose lives could potentially be saved. So they have to figure out a way to slow it down and stop it and be able to evacuate the people on there. That brings into play a couple of other characters named Joss and Pika Adren, who are a husband and wife team. They're basically tinkerers, engineers that were in the area because they were working on this project for the Republic, and I'll talk about that here in a minute. And then because they have skill, they get roped into helping out, and they come up with the idea that if the Jedi can use the Force to slow down this hurtling ship enough, that they could attach tow cables to it and sort of grind it to a stop. But they wouldn't be able to just get the cables attached without the help of the Jedi, because it would just, rip the ship apart or whatever. So they work in tandem together to be able to slow this ship chunk down. And those are two characters that feature in some short stories in Star Wars Insider, which I'll talk about towards the end of this video. Anyway, that's sort of how the first third of the novel wraps up. It really covers a lot of ground. It's high action, high octane, very suspenseful. And, I'm only sort of spoiling what happens there because it happens very early on in the novel, and it's not, the rest of the novel as it unfolds is sort of the mystery about why that happened and who or what is behind the ship that was stuck in hyperspace that was thought to be an impossibility in the first place. And that's where sort of the bigger meat of the novel comes from in the remaining 2/3 of the book. Then it starts splitting up its focus into a couple of different regions. You start to meet basically the villains of the novel, which are this group of pirates called the Nile. The name the Nile is a little bit on the nose, I guess, or there's been some complaints that it's a little bit on the nose, but in all honesty, I would argue that it's kind of not. I don't think it's the most catchy name in the world, but I don't have that much of a problem with it. I don't think it's very much on the nose because the characters themselves aren't really very nihilistic. They actually have belief in some things. They're not just simply agents of chaos. They're trying to earn money. They believe in their own freedom and these kind of things. They're more anarchists than they are nihilists. That's not to say that anarchy and nihilism can't go hand in hand, but I would argue that they're kind of anarchists that believe in things to a certain extent. Now, they're a vast group that are run by a bunch of different people that have the ability to think and feel a whole lot of things. So there's not a unified belief amongst the Nihil. But I would argue that the people at the top, the people that get the focus in the novel, the way that, and it describes how their organization is structured and stuff like that. The people at the top of their organization do sort of have thoughts and beliefs and feelings about their position in the universe and what their goals and what they're trying to accomplish and so on and so forth. So they're very interesting. It's kind of cool to give the Jedi something different to do. They're not really up against like Dark Force users or magical beings like the Night Sisters in the Clone Wars or anything like that. These are just really nasty pirates who have a competitive edge in the galaxy with what they do because they have an ability to control hyperspace lanes, because they have a line on technology and forces that the rest of the people in the galaxy and the Republic and everything like that never understood were possible. So basically, they're sort of technologically ahead of the rest of the galaxy for reasons that I probably won't spoil here because they're kind of interesting to delve into, but there are reasons why the Nihil sort of have an edge on everybody else, and so that's kind of interesting. And there is a, in the midst of figuring out that mystery of why they have an edge and why they're able to do what they're doing, you will find the name of a family that you are familiar with if you know a good amount about Star Wars. You'll see some familiar names, not familiar characters, but a familiar family name. I won't spoil that either. It's kind of fun to discover it on your own. But that's part of the mystery of how they're capable of doing what they're doing. So that's a big part of the action in the back 2/3 of the novel, is just figuring out the villains, how they're structured, what their goals are, and that sort of thing. And then that sort of breaks things off into some interesting, point of view segments, because the Republic and the Jedi are trying to clean up from the Hetzel disaster, the Great Disaster, and discover what happened. And meanwhile, while there's chaos going on, the Nihil are trying to take advantage of the disaster and the fact that they are still ahead of everybody. So they launch these plans to try to go to certain planets and extort them while they're down. There's some planets that have already been hit by some of the space debris, and their populations have been decimated and so on. So they're trying to exploit those people groups or just straight up rob them and things like that. So that's some of the point of view stuff. There's also a Jedi Outpost on a planet called Elfrona, which is in the Outer Rim, and that's where some of a good amount of the action takes place in the latter half of the novel, where there is a family that lives in this homestead out in the middle of nowhere on this sort of deserted planet. They're a part of a farming and mining operation, I guess, and they are getting attacked and kidnapped by the Nihil for some reason, and the only people that are anywhere near there are the Jedi, because there's a Jedi temple or Jedi outpost on this planet. It's not really a temple, I guess. It's a Jedi center on this planet, and part of the novel is them going to rescue these people and figuring out why they're of any interest to the Nihil and so on. And that is one of the more interesting angles in the book. So again, I probably won't delve too deep into what happens there, because the payoff, at first you're kind of confused. What do these people have to do with anything, and why are all of a sudden we focusing on this little planet and these 4 or 5 people? I would encourage you to stick with that storyline, because the payoff for that is worthwhile. So just you'll figure out it comes together. Trust the author on that one. And then there's a lot of stuff that happens in Coruscant with Chancellor Soule, Lena Soule. Her big focus in this book is she's concerned with trying to build these great wonders throughout the galaxy to inspire goodwill and confidence in the Republic, as well as reminders throughout various points in the galaxy that everybody's in it together, that she has this saying, "We are all the Republic," and she wants these great wonders to sort of inspire people, to band people together. One of those wonders that she's working on in the beginning of this book, trying to unveil, is this space station called the Starlight Beacon, which is out in the Outer Rim near the Hetzel area, which is kind of one of the reasons why there were Jedi there to respond pretty quickly to the great disaster, because they were about to unveil this thing. It was kind of getting ready to go, and then this disaster happened. So she's concerned with still getting the Starlight Beacon off the ground, Chancellor Soule, I mean, because she still, she doesn't want people to lose confidence, especially now that there's this traumatic event that people might be worried about. And then in the midst of doing all of that, there's some politics in the book that are pretty reminiscent of our own here in the United States in the era of the pandemic and everything like that. So it's not glaringly obvious. Charles Soule is not hammering hard, despite what you may have heard. It's not overly mirrored of our own politics or anything like that. They're not injecting it with a point of view necessarily, other than what you may bring to it. I will just say that it's highly reminiscent. You will recognize scenarios that you're probably currently familiar with, such as there is this giant catastrophe that is affecting millions, billions of people, and they need to shut down the hyperspace lanes until they can figure out whether or not they're safe enough to even use, or if they're going to be able to predict these emergencies where all this wreckage is going to be flying out into other places of the galaxy. And while they have all of these lanes shut down and they're trying to figure out these mysteries, there are a bunch of other senators that are concerned with the economic loss of everything, that they should open everything back up immediately because places are losing money and access to goods and all of this sort of thing. And so there's all these arguments about, trying to figure out and get their minds wrapped around a disaster while simultaneously trying to figure out how to balance a galactic economy and not keep everything closed down for an indefinite period of time. So those situations will, like I said, it's not the hugest focus of the novel. It's one of the smaller focuses, but it will ring true. And the scenario that's going on sort of in the background, the political scenario that's going on in this novel, will feel familiar if you are, American or live in the Western world, stuff like that. So, that's just to say that it's there. If that's something that totally bugs you or totally turns you off, and I'm not sure what to tell you, it's there. It really worked for me. Like I said, I'm a fan of the politics of Star Wars in general, and I think not only does it ring true for me in terms of a realistic problem that somewhat mirrors one that we're facing in the world right now, but it's also really true to Star Wars. It's true to how the politics in Star Wars works. You can see the seeds of 200 years down the road of people starting to lose confidence in the Jedi, people starting to lose confidence in the Republic and those kinds of things. And they're barely alluding to all that stuff down the road, because we're talking about a 200-year span. They may never even get to that with this initiative. I don't know how far they're going to keep publishing High Republic novels. Regardless, the politics feel very in line with the rest of the Star Wars universe, particularly the prequel trilogy and the Clone Wars era. So it's very interesting to see some of those seeds be planted. So those are kind of the things that are happening in the back half of the novels. They're trying to negotiate all of this stuff while the Nihil are, picking on people and robbing people, extorting planets. And then, of course, at the end of the novel, it ends in a big space battle where there's this big confrontation and all the moving parts sort of nicely come back together. And I won't spoil the fallout of that either, because it really is worthwhile. This is an excellent novel, a great way to kick off the High Republic publishing initiative. It makes me interested in stories to come. I'm interested in many of these characters. Some of them I'm not tremendously attached to, but there are none that I out and out dislike. There are several that I'm extremely interested to see what happens with in the future. without sort of individually breaking them all down in this particular video, which is just sort of a general review and general discussion about the book. So that's essentially my sort of overarching thoughts about Light of the Jedi. I really liked it. I really like Charles Soule a lot. I'm kind of down for whatever Star Wars stuff he wants to do at this point. I haven't been super duper gung-ho in love with everything he's done, but I've tremendously liked everything that he's done. So that's not to say that, you're going to gel with an artist every single time, but there haven't really been any misses in his catalog, in his Star Wars catalog for me. So Charles Soule has been doing great. This novel was great, and he was a good choice to sort of kick off the High Republic with a bang, a literal one. It was more fun than I thought it would be, and more exciting than I thought it would be. I thought it would be, I would get some prequel vibes of, okay, we're getting an event, and then everything is going to slow down, and things are going to be more political because it's a time of peace, and there's going to be more conversational stuff. But really, it's extremely action-packed. People are on their heels. This is a big disaster book, and it's just really interesting. So that's Light of the Jedi by Charles Soule. Very cool. The other thing I wanted to talk about before I wrap this up is the issues of Star Wars Insider Magazine 199 and 200 each include a short story by Charles Soule that are companion pieces to Light of the Jedi. It's a two-part story called Go Together, and it sort of bookends the novel. Go Together Part 1 is sort of a prologue to Light of the Jedi, and Go Together Part 2 is kind of an epilogue. And they almost feel sort of like chapters maybe that Charles Soule had originally written for the novel and just sort of held them back in order to be able to publish some additional short story content in Star Wars Insider Magazine, which I don't mind too much. I always like when Star Wars Insider has some new fiction and new short stories and stuff like that. It's sort of a nice extra feature for the magazine if you're a reader of Star Wars Insider. Basically, both of those stories focus on Joss and Pika Adren, the characters that I talked about earlier on. They were sort of tinkerers and engineers. In the prologue story, they are working on polishing up the Starlight Beacon, the space station. They were some of the people who helped engineer it, and they find a sort of flaw in the electrical system that they have to figure out, and that's kind of the gist of the short story. And at the end of the short story is when the great disaster happens, and they sort of they're on their way to have a vacation after working on the Starlight Beacon, and they don't make it to their, that whole cliche of we were on our last job before we're going to go take 2 weeks off and have a romantic interlude with each other. But no, they get pulled right back into the action because the disaster happens on their way to their vacation. And so they volunteer themselves to help out because they have flying skill. And of course, as I said, they help the galaxy avert the great disaster. The epilogue story is sort of the fallout of everything that happens in Light of the Jedi, and it features them as well. They feature in the final battle and so on. So I guess spoiler alert there, they don't die or anything. And in that epilogue story, it's sort of everybody trying to piece together what happened in this battle, what happens next with the Nile. There are some people who are in a rush to, get the economy back going again, that they just want to say, the Nile are gone, we've dispatched them, everything's fine. And a bunch of other people that are like, there's no evidence of that, they might still be out there, we're not sure. And so Joss and Pika get asked to be part of this coalition or group going forward that helps to scour the galaxy for evidence of future emergences, future Nile activity, and stuff like that. But not before they get a chance to go on their vacation. They say they agree to be able to do this mission, but they're going to take their 2 weeks off first and go on vacation. So they're fun little short stories that sort of bookend it nicely. One of the things that was surprising to me about those is, of course, they're fluffy. They're not tremendously adding a whole bunch of plot details to what already happened in the novel, but they did do a good job of sort of endearing those characters to me more. They were interesting to me in the novel, but I wasn't, super duper loving them or hating them, or wanting to see more of them or not wanting to see more of them one way or another. But then reading the epilogue story in Star Wars Insider 200, it really endeared me to those characters. And when it came up that they were going to be part of this coalition to scour out more Nihil activity and stuff like that, that they were going to be involved with that, it did make me want to see more of them. So I'm kind of in for more Joss and Pika Adren adventures. I'm a little bit more interested in those characters now than I was before, actually, thanks to the short stories. So that's all of the Light of the Jedi stuff that came out. Of course, there's more stuff in the High Republic Initiative. There's 2 running comic series right now. I'll be sure to make a video of those at some point, I'm sure, as well as a middle grade novel and a young adult novel by Justina Ireland and Claudia Gray, respectively. And I'm working on reading those and probably giving my thoughts on those at some very soon future date. As I said, it took me a little while to read these, but I kind of figured at this point I'd be able to discuss it with it as much or few spoilers as I wanted to, without really bugging anybody, including Del Rey and Disney and the Lucasfilm people. So, not that I'm worried about them coming after me or anything, but I just wanted to give people a chance to read the book, including myself. At that, I'm going to sign off here. I hope you enjoyed this, found it informative, whatever. If you have questions, if you want to interact, if there's more you want to know, or more things you want to see in a future video talking about Star Wars, let me know. This is fun to do. Thanks as always for watching these. May the Force be with you, and take care. Bye-bye.